Hello, everybody. This is part two of our kind of series we just made on advice for incoming or current freshman engineering students. So we had a great conversation on part one, but we wanted to continue it to part two. And so, part two, one of the things that I wanted to kick off, and Matt, maybe you can add on to this, was talking about how there are going to be some weeks during the semester. Usually, semesters are like what, like 15, 16 weeks or something like that. There's going to be some weeks that are going to seem really, really light and easy, where you might only have a couple homework assignments. There's going to be other weeks that are just exams in every single class, labs due. It's going to be very busy. How do you manage your time between
I
all of
think
that?
I think one key is when the weeks are easy, you don't you take advantage of that. I
Yeah.
know what's that is it Labor Day is usually in September, right?
Yeah, you have a day off
You
there.
have a day off, many students. And
Then you have
so
October, you have like fall break.
in though I specifically remember like Labor Day, it's what's interesting about that is what we talked about last time. The first 1 or 2 weeks of your class might be a little easier, like review of older material. Well, if you use that period of time where not only is your coursework maybe less because the semester is just starting out and the material isn't as difficult, try getting ahead if you can. That could be beneficial.
How can someone get ahead in lecture if they don't have the lectures in front of
So
them? Like it didn't happen yet.
some things so the in terms of getting ahead, I think there's a couple different things you could work on. Either so for me it boils down to two different things. You could work on the actual getting ahead. So this is usually in the syllabus. You'll see, oh, what the next, basically all the lectures are the rest of the semester. Usually in the syllabus, at least in my experience, is literally gives you a breakdown of the topics covered like each week during
Yeah,
the
like
class.
lecture topics or week
Yeah.
topics.
And
Yeah.
you'll know like exactly what you'll cover five lectures from now. And so one thing could be literally getting ahead in that regard and maybe reading the chapter ahead of time, taking notes on the chapter just by reading it yourself. And this is for not every class will have that, but that's some of the classes will. And then another thing that maybe you could do is a more administrative side of preparing and just organizing yourself so that you can manage better during the rest of the semester. So this is if you haven't already looked through all the different syllabus that you have and putting dates in your calendar for quizzes, exams, things like that, or if you're not, if you still have to buy a text, like things that maybe aren't necessarily related to the specific material, but will help you remain organized and manage better later on.
Yeah, yeah. Or focus on what just happened the next
Yeah.
or the previous like 2, 3 weeks, because those 2, 3 weeks are like the foundational weeks that you're helping like build a foundation on for the class and making sure that you're like all set, no questions asked on those types of topics. Because even like the first midterm, like half of it or something. I mean, of course, depends on the class, but like a lot of it can just kind of be based on those like original weeks and making sure that you're like you
Right.
have the baseline knowledge plus maybe a few intro stuff or plus maybe a few stuff unique to that course.
Actually, now with the midterm, that's an interesting thing to bring up. So for if you're a freshman, it's not necessarily like high school. These classes will go fast. The materials, new material every lecture. So when it comes to midterms, usually I feel like it depends, varies from maybe school to school, class to class. But if I'm, in my recollection, it's usually like midterm happens pretty quickly.
It's that first one's always a surprise. It's that end of September, beginning of October.
Yeah.
And you start school and like
And then
midterms are
all of a sudden it's there.
really come up really quickly. And so yeah.
When it comes to then actually doing well on that midterm, this is where you want to listen to this, and you'll probably come back and be like, "Hey, these guys gave some pretty good advice." Don't like wait till the last minute to start studying for that midterm. Give yourself a couple days, a week in advance to start looking at material.
And through the semester, one of like the mentalities that I would have during the semester, and like this isn't like a but would be after every week, can I have like a pop quiz in this class and do well on it? So like if you had lecture Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you go through Monday, Wednesday, Friday lecture and just like I would ask myself, okay,
Right.
if I had a pop quiz on Monday about what was just covered this week, would I be able to do well? And that way I'm always just able to do these little efforts to make sure that I was always studying and prepared for exams, so that when the exam came around, it's just refreshing on stuff. It's not teaching new material. You're focused on, instead of learning, you're focused on performing, put it that way, for the exams.
And then another thing, I know we talked about office hours before. Going to office hours to help prepare for an exam could also be useful. If you get to talk with the professor about maybe a topic that you're struggling to understand, that could be useful.
And that's the thing that's important about going to every lecture as much as you can, because that the professor, if you're familiar with your face, and there are classes where like lecture hall is filled out by like 10%. Like just if attendance is optional, like the lecture just not many students might go to lecture.
10% seems kind of low, but
I'm just saying, like,
but the idea is some students.
the number doesn't matter. The point is that there's if attendance is mandatory, the lecture might be full, perhaps majority full. But if attendance is not mandatory, I still found it valuable to go, not just because you learn everything in lecture, but because you're actually getting FaceTime with the professor and they can actually recognize you from lecture.
Right.
And it shows that you're putting in the effort and appreciating their time to teach the class. And they may be a little bit, I mean, I don't know, but like, I'm just like personally, they just might be a little bit more open to providing feedback and guidance for helping prepare for those exams.
Of course. And then I would also say too, I'm just thinking of things that maybe would happen the very first time for a student, which is you're given the opportunity to use a cheat sheet, right? Now, on a cheat sheet, do you want to try to cram as much information as possible on that cheat sheet?
For me, it was making it as clear and as organized as possible, because what I didn't want was to be wasting a bunch of time navigating my cheat sheet during the exam. And this is where, if you really know the material, if you have like a concept or a framework for how you approach the problems, then you can be able to create a cheat sheet. So we had cheat sheets in stochastic modeling. I studied industrial engineering. And basically the way that you can get different scenarios, like queue systems, like there's, X number of people in a line at a grocery store, and there's Y number of people at a line at another line in the grocery store. And this clerk checks out at this rate, and this clerk checks out a customer at this rate, right? And like, you could do like a bunch of like simulations based on it. But ultimately what I wanted to do, and you would use like a bunch of different equations. Or another thing would be like mechanics of materials, or like where you have like, it's the next level of statics. I think it's like dynamics, where you have different beams and there's different forces acting on a beam, and the beam is supported in a different way. And you're going to get like a different scenarios. And instead of copying like specific problems, I'd focus on concepts. I'd focus on what a problem like is set up as, and that's what I would focus my cheat sheet on.
I think also though,
But it depends on the class.
Depends on the class, the professor. They might have limitations on what you can put on your cheat sheet.
That's
but also,
it, yeah.
what I would say is, and usually what I found too is that if they let you make a cheat sheet, the cheat sheet, whatever you could put on the cheat sheet, is pretty much not going to be good enough to help you do well in the exam.
That's a really good point.
It's literally just like an aid.
A cheat sheet does not mean the exam is going to be super easy. A cheat sheet actually might mean, again, it's all, and for the record, I don't think I had a cheat sheet on the mechanics of materials. I was just bringing that up because of how you can structure problems. I think from my memory, that was like 5 years ago or something like that. But to your point, if they give you a cheat sheet, it might actually mean the exam could be very difficult if you have a cheat sheet.
And the thing is too, there even if it's like, say, an open book, some even may make it open book. I may recall an open book exam once or twice, but like the thing is, when it comes to the open books, the cheat sheets, there's so much material on the exam that like an open book, if you rely on the open book, you may end up like really hurting your performance on the exam, because there's so much material on it. It's going to take you more time to find what you need in the book.
The way that I would approach the exams, when you're allowed supplemental resources for it, like a cheat sheet or open book or open note, would be ready to do the exam without any additional materials.
Yeah.
And then if you're stuck on the exam, use the additional materials to supplement.
Exactly.
That's what I would do. I wouldn't like rely on resources.
So I think that would be the point. The cheat sheet, what's allowed, what's not, probably varies with the professor and the class. But also, if you do get a cheat sheet, don't rely on it. Like
Prep like you don't have
prep
one. Yeah.
like you don't have on it. You rely on it if like you need to, but like don't expect that the cheat sheet will carry you to an A.
Exactly.
test.
Exactly.
But otherwise, thanks for watching. And if you are interested in more advice for freshmen, let us know. Let us know in the comments.